You're listening to the Foolproof Wisdom Podcast, where we bring our authentic selves, refuse to raise grown folks, and share wisdom you can use. With your host, Charles K. Poole.
Good day, good people, and welcome to the podcast. Do you ever watch the news or read newspapers, which not many people seem to do these days, and wonder about how the stories being told today seem so much different than they used to? Do you wonder how we've gone from Walter Cronkite being the trusted figure he was to journalists being perceived as untrustworthy and anything but objective and fair? Well, I sure have. And having begun my career as a journalist and still considering myself a recovering one, in a sense, I wanted to talk about that. So here we are. Today's guest is one many of you might recognize, especially St. Louisans, as he's a seasoned journalist and professional communicator who has appeared on your television screens and produced programming behind the scenes for quite some time. Jonathan Clarke is a writer and Emmy Award-winning journalist who has worked in broadcasting, communications, and marketing for more than 35 years. He specializes in news analysis, strategic communications, multi-platform writing, broadcast and print journalism, voiceovers, and on-camera talent. Jonathan has been a news reporter and producer at television network affiliates in the Midwest and the Mid-South, including St. Louis and Memphis, Tennessee. He has produced programs for public television and produced and reported for locally streamed television magazine programs. Jonathan has appeared on nationally televised news programs, including as a commentator for Al Jazeera during the Ferguson riots. He is passionate about telling consistently high-value human stories, whatever the platform, and still believes that the story is the thing in the best way possible. As the stories being told today become more challenging and the perception of what is truth less certain, I'm looking forward to a really great discussion that will help me, and hopefully all of you, make sense of it all. When Jonathan isn't working, he finds singing, writing creative fiction and poetry, photography, and cooking provide him much needed outlets to not only keep it real for himself, but also in how he approaches his work objectively and with a continuing interest in the human condition. So let's talk about it all, starting now. Good morning, Jonathan, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, good morning, Charles. Great to be here, always.
Good. By the way, the beard is bearding.
Ah!
I'm so envious of it. You know that, right?
Just when I was about to shave it off. Okay, good.
Yeah, no. The beard is doing its job. I am so envious. If I could grow that, my life would change, I tell you.
You know what's really funny? The beard has taken on a life all its own. So it got this, ever since I was, I don't know. So I tried to shave this puppy in high school.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever that myth is that they say about, if you shave it, then it'll come in. I bought into that, tried to shave it. And so I've had some sort of facial hair ever since high school. Then I alternately on and off.
Right.
Had it on as many times off. At some point, I decided to keep it on and not dye it. That's where we got to the whole white thing, and then popular opinion said keep it in, so I've kept it in. It's kind of become a brand. So,
well, I think that's kind of putting you in the category of officially being a zaddy, from what I understand.
No.
So, hey, if it's working, it's working. So we're going to say that. So, Jonathan, I've been lately having moments as I've been watching and listening what's going on in the world. And, you're a journalist and much more than just a journalist, but journalism is foundational. I started off that way. And to an extent, I still consider myself as a communicator, to be recording and telling the stories of people. But I've got to tell you, every time I happen to read another article, or I see what's going on in the broadcast world, I put my head in my hands and I want to just cry because there is such a load of you know what happening when it comes to information, that it's very difficult to discern what is truth. And I thought, I want to talk about this. I really want to talk about it with someone who's going to give me an honest perspective. And I thought of you. And so that's the question I'm going to begin with today is, you've been doing this all for a minute now as a journalist. And in my intro, I mentioned, we went from the point where Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America to the point that no one believes anything that anybody says when their so-called journalism is being propelled in the world. And then we also have this whole new advent, it's not really even new now, of everybody's a journalist. If you've got a phone and you can record it, you're a journalist. So to begin this conversation, how have you perceived what's going on today, given when you started and you were so very eager and hopeful as a journalist about what you'd be doing, as far as where we were versus where we are now?
Yeah, that's a good place. I think a good place to start, first of all, is why, or let's just hit the mic like that. That's not good. Let's get a basic baseline here of what the public thinks of media. And the last I saw was a recent Gallup poll which showed Americans' trust in the media as somewhere around 30 to 39%, something like that. It was something in the 30s. And so then the question put to them was, about their faith in the media, and I think about 32% it might have been, that believed that the media presented news in a way that was fair or balanced. That means that 70% of people who are watching the product are either not believing you at all or having many questions about whether what you say is accurate. And that's not a place that you can be, if only because the one of the hallmarks and the cornerstone of a democracy is information. And trusting that the information that you have is fair, balanced, and most importantly is accurate. When I got into this, I think I knew from the time I was 12 that I wanted to be in journalism. And it was because, back then it was because I lived in New York. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. And so the whole media was everything back then.
Right.
It was flashy and glitzy. And for the longest time, I didn't even realize that there was a difference between local stations and national stations because, of course, with New York being the flagship, many of the people who I'd see on local news also might cross over and go down the hall and do things on national. So for me, it was one big thing. And it was just really glitzy and glamorous, and there was such an air of authority.
Right.
And, there was something to seeing those news guys just everywhere, telling you about everything and being in the know and mixing in there. And there is something about the trust. And you have to remember, I'm 70 years old.
Okay. 29.
29, plus, one or two extra scoops of whipped cream in there. But, when I was a kid, we were I was coming of age right around the time of Watergate. So I couldn't tell you what Watergate was about, but I knew enough to know that it was scandalous.
Exactly.
I knew enough to know that Nixon was not to be liked or revered. And I knew it was a really big deal to break stories. I came out of that whole, just the whole Woodward and Bernstein,
right,
all the presidents met era.
Right.
And I think a lot of people got into news around when I did because news was authoritative. I remember back in the day, I used to watch Lou Grant. Do you remember Lou Grant? The TV
Absolutely.
show? Oh my goodness. Oh, that was my thing,
Yeah.
That was really my jam. I wanted to be a part of that. And I think indeed by the time I got into the industry, it was right on that cusp where the industry started to become a lot more corporate. news became less of a public service than it did a revenue generator. And the powers that be discovered that they could generate more revenue by making newsrooms a lot more lean. So that's right about, and the technology allowed that. So used to be, in order to produce the product, if we just start thinking of this in purely manufacturing terms, in order to produce a media product, you have to, I'm talking television now, you had to have a certain amount of staff to get the job done.
Right.
You obviously had to have a reporter, but then you needed to have somebody who was a videographer or someone who filmed it, someone who had the camera. And then you also needed to have somebody who could record the audio. And the technology over time permitted you to have fewer people on the actual crews would go out. Then eventually you didn't necessarily need to have the guy who had the microphone, who was doing audio. You'd have a guy walk around with a big deck here, as doing the work of shooting it and collecting it on the media, on tape at that time. And you still needed the reporter. And then you start having the single unit cameras, which no longer required you to have the deck. And that was a transition point. That was a major pivotal moment in broadcast news, which put you one step away from even having to have a photographer.
Exactly.
So now you start to have a reporter and a photographer, or maybe just a reporter also acting as a photographer, which changes the way that you get the job done. Because there used to be, I could let my photographer go and get pictures and the other thing, and I can work the story more journalistically.
Exactly.
Try to find a little bit of information. But now I'm getting pictures and I'm going around and doing journalism at the same time. Journalism and photojournalism. And, for a while, in my view, I think that compromises the product a little bit. It compromises the way you get things done. Clearly, it's been shown that and demonstrated that it can be done. You can get it done. I don't know if you're getting it done at the same sort of same caliber of quality that you once had.
Right.
And when you start changing the method of delivering the product, then I think it ultimately results in an entirely different product. Some of that's been for the good. I mean, I think the way that we're able to get information to people more quickly, on the one hand, is very good. We can see things as they happen. I think there's value in that, but also seeing things as they happen exposes you to getting things wrong, because the first things you see aren't necessarily all the right things. So we're at a place right now where the things that we see are open to interpretation because everyone can do it, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I don't think people trust media as much as they once did.
So the thing that I always find interesting, and thank you for that great analysis. I think that puts a lot into context. But as we're looking at the types of stories, if we're going to call them that are being created now under those circumstances, there's also this part that I'm interested in terms of when people have a reaction to what they're seeing and they're saying, oh my gosh, the media is this or the media isn't that. But there's also the layer that says they're responding to what you are asking for as the news consumer. And what people are asking for, if we can call it news, is far different than it used to be. So all of those consolidated efforts that you're talking about, it ends up with a different product, or indeed one thing. But when people pretty much are looking for news to be reality TV, that's a whole different set of circumstances. Speak with me a little bit about your perception of that question as it relates to how, when you take those elements you described and then layer on this expectation for reality TV, we continue down this path of where in the hell are we going?
Yeah, I get that. So if you don't mind, I want to talk about strawberries.
Okay.
I was Listening to NPR sometime back in maybe the spring, summer or something like that. I can't recall the author at the time and the guy who did the research, but he was talking about food manufacturing, food production, and of course, just the increasingly shrinking number of food producers and food manufacturers, and some of the work that goes into making foods palatable and even desirable so that it creates more of a market for consumers, food consumers. And one of the things that he said that was interesting is foods are engineered right now to the extent that they're not entirely recognizable.
That's right.
Even with foods that we would imagine are fresh foods, like strawberries. So you thought you'd wonder what's like with strawberries. They're manufactured, and I use that word intentionally, in such a way that they're even sweeter than they once were. So when we see a strawberry and we taste it, what we now understand as a strawberry is different than what a strawberry might have tasted like before. Our perception of what the sweetness that a strawberry should have is based on years of manufacturing, and we've created a strawberry that's sweeter, that tastes different. So if I gave you a strawberry from before, which wasn't as manufactured, you wouldn't recognize it as being as sweet. This is not what I need. This is not the expectation I have. Because you've given me something that you've called a strawberry that is different from just more wholesome originally. I think that's where we are with news. I think we've given audiences something that looked like news. It's a lot more glamorized, maybe a lot less urgent. If you're talking about the Kardashians, maybe that's what folks expected as news. It's not the same diet, not the same nutrition, doesn't have the same nutritional value as the news that you and I grew up on. So what would happen if we gave folks the kind of news that you and I grew up on? It might be a little bit unrecognizable now. And so the question is, how do we inform the audience with a different kind of strawberry that they're accustomed to?
That is a fantastic question, one to which I don't have an answer, but we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there. Because when I'm looking at this, I love the reference to the strawberry. That was brilliant, actually. Bravo. Okay, that's good. As we're even talking about the things, the reality television of it all, if we're talking about the strawberry, again, which I think fits into that context perfectly, even when it comes to the important issues, the things that are life-defining, world-defining, once we look at what's been fed now in this steady diet of a different strawberry, to continue with that analogy, people have now decided that if it doesn't fit into this box or that box, that it can't possibly be true. Because the box is the limit, and that limit shifts for each and every person based on a number of different factors. So continuing as we discuss this, now let's talk about that element of it all, that question of truth. Because I mentioned the whole Walter Cronkite thing before. I grew up at a time, and I will tell you my year of birth, 1963.
Okay, there we go. We're just about in there.
There we go. Yeah. But if he said it, it was believed. If he was on the screen, you knew that's what was happening. And you go back to the point where he had to, of course, report on the Kennedy assassination, and that now, historic video of him telling it as it is, which is the way he ended the newscast, and that's the way it is. But now you mentioned something in the conversation a little while ago about, not only what people are being given, but there's also this expectation now that people who deliver our news are supposed to be more like characters as opposed to people the individuals can trust and believe in. What do you see that realization doing in terms of whether or not what we are now delivering, the strawberryness of it all, as having an impact on that believability factor?
Yeah. So, I like props.
Okay.
And
I don't know what you're going to come up with.
I wasn't even really prepared.
Okay. Oh boy.
But I wanted to buy a microphone yesterday. I'm going to pull this apart real quickly, just very quick look. And I can pull this apart. Okay, great. So if we look at this, right?
Okay.
And I would say, okay, so what do you see on here?
I see a piece of paper that looks like it was once something that had a gift card attached to it.
Yeah, right. But is there anything written on it?
I can't see anything written.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm looking at exactly the exact same card. And,
right.
And clearly there's something written on it.
Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm saying.
You told me but I'm telling you, there's something written on it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We're looking at the same card.
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you that clearly there's something written on it. Uh-huh. I don't understand why you can't see it. Well, you don't see it because I've got to flip it around.
There you go.
Show you that, in fact, there really is something written on it.
Exactly.
Once I flip it around, then we can agree, oh, okay. Well, I just didn't know there was something written on it because you did show me how to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Once I showed you that there was something there, we could agree, oh, well, the reason why I didn't know that there was I didn't see that side.
Mm-hmm.
The way you saw that card was because that's the side of the card
right.
you're on.
Mm-hmm.
The way I saw that card was because that's the side of the card I was on. We could look at the same card, and then once we could show each other, and also when I flipped it over, I could, now I see why you thought there was nothing there, because you were saying there was nothing where you saw it.
Right.
But now if I hold the same card up again, and I ask you, well, what is this? And you answered, this is a card.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, no, it's not a card. Clearly, that's a pen. You say, well, it's a card. Well, no, I'm holding a pen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can never agree on truth.
Mm-hmm.
We can't even start talking. I can't show you the other side because we're talking about two different things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How we define truth now has changed from any way it's ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
Walter Cronkite could say, and that's the way it is, January 6th. He could always do that. And we could agree, because we could at least agree that he was starting from a certain level of truth.
Mm.
You didn't have to agree on how to digest the truth, but you had the same foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Now we don't have to agree on truth, and we can select who we want to tell us the truth so that it matches ours.
Right.
It's almost, and I'm going to say this really carefully, not to offend anyone who's a person of faith, but it's almost a matter of how we select faith these days. Mm-hmm. We find the truth that we want, and I grew up in a Christian household, and so even within the whole Protestant Christianity, I mean, you could decide, well, I'd want to be an AME instead of a Baptist, or I want to be a Kojic instead of any of the. I mean, you can kind of select the category that you want to fit in to find the truth that fits, that suits you. And when you start going to a place and or leaving a place because they're not giving you the truth that you want, then you start to by design alter the truth that you hear. And technology makes that even more. So we had Fox News come on the scene some couple decades ago or so, promising to be fair and balanced, targeting a specific audience, which sort of allowed you to skew the truths that you had there.
Right.
But that was within a broadcast context. What happens now when you're on some sort of computer device, your
Right.
phone, and you're on the internet. And these media companies, these social media companies, are specifically sending you the news that you want based on your algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you're not even aware of it, you're being marketed the news that you want to hear and the truth that you want to hear in the way you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Even more in the word everyone's using right now, diabolical.
It's a good word.
But it's a good word. It's a good word. I think there's a certain intent to that to that word. But you see, now we're at a place right now where we can find the truth that we want to believe and find the people who will tell us that truth constantly. And the amount of times that our truths cross paths and actually connect these days tend to be fewer and further between.
It's distressing to me because let's go back to the two scenarios: the card with the writing on the side, one, and not on the other, and then the pen and the card. So that latter one, of course, I totally get that. My put my head through the ceiling moment happens when, with the card with the writing on the one side, that even after you turn the card around and show them the writing, then it becomes this: well, you somehow must have gotten someone to put that on there while I was watching you, because it wasn't on there. I tell you, there was no. That's the thing that drives me to extremes. And I want to talk about that because as you're talking about and laying it out so perfectly, how we are selectively incorporating what is truth. That's the one thing I still can't get, is what type of insanity, okay, is happening in a person's head where it's literally right there. And instead of accepting it for what it is, they spend more effort concocting a rationale for what it isn't than to accept what it is. Given all that you've explained here, I want to hear your perspectives on that, because I'm at the point now, and I'll illustrate this, and bear with me here, and I'll leave a moment here so that you can then respond. But I was looking this morning out on social media, and of all the things, I don't know how this ended up in my feed, but it's a picture of Jennifer Lopez with Alex Rodriguez. And someone has decided to say, J-Lo is crazy. You know, just after breaking up with Ben Affleck, she's right back with Alex Rodriguez, right? One person, and I want to just write to this person and say, God bless you, because while everybody else was on there just buying what they were being told, this one person said, that's an iPhone blank, blank, blank. This must have been at least 10 years ago. But yet it's presented out there and people jump on and they're just like, yeah, she's out of her mind. It's time. No consideration for whether or not they were being played. So that thing, going back to the card, there's the writing. But that person will find any other rationale that they possibly can other than the absolute truth, because they don't want to believe the truth, regardless of what side of the fence they sit on. They just don't want to believe anything is true. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, one of the things that we need to be cognizant of is that media doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
It's one part of a larger cultural society panoply. And so it's influenced by all of the different machinations and changes of the greater culture.
Right.
And so when you and I grew up, it was fair to say that truth was whatever people told you it was.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't very much questioning about truth.
Right.
Again, going back to that Cronkite model, you could be relatively assured that what he said was what people would believe, and And if he said it, it was true.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a whole bunch of questioning whether it was or not,
Sure.
was or was not. But you might also see one of the byproducts of Cronkite was he was one of the first, that era of news was one of the first times, and probably, again, because of the medium that we had, because you could see the civil rights protests.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't just reading it, now you could see. You could see water hoses trained on people, which affected you differently. You could see Vietnam, which you couldn't see war before that, like that. And so with him showing you, for example, Vietnam, he could show you that the things that the government was saying were not true. And of course, Johnson is quoted saying, "Well, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost And so, interestingly enough, it's around that time that we first begin to really, as consumers of news, have our moorings shook. Ironically, by the news itself, which has shown you a contrary view to what, in that case, the government was saying.
Right.
So the news was able to expose the contrariness in this then newer media. And I think if I had to trace it back, I'd say that's probably one of the first places where, as a collective society, we began to contend with not believing all that we saw. And back then for legitimate reasons. But we could at least agree that what we were disagreeing on with the government was backed by a level of acceptable facts.
Sure. Yeah.
We're so far down that track right now that now we don't believe just because we choose not to believe. And so there is no central truth that we should adhere to.
Right.
That's one part of it. The other part is we're at a place in society right now where some people are content to say that what is truth? There is no truth, which of course, logically is untrue.
Exactly.
But if you say that truth can be whatever you want it to be, societally, if that's baked into the cake, then that's going to find its way into media, because media is a part of the greater societal culture. And so we're at a place where truth is malleable. It's bendable. We can flex it any way we choose to live the reality that we want. So you have clusters of people who are believing the things that they want. And I think over time, very soon, it's going to be more difficult to distinguish truth. Right. Especially with the onset of AI, and AI becoming much more sophisticated and much more available.
That's right.
At a consumer level.
Right.
And sophisticated at a consumer level.
Right.
So, you're able to do things on your phone right now that George Lucas needed 6 months to do with a team of 100 animators.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because, excuse me, there's a high level of desensitization to anything being real. You see it when so-called citizen journalists are watching someone being murdered and standing there with their phones recording it. You see it when we just had the shooting in Georgia, the other day. And then people...
That was tragedy.
Yeah, total. But then people start debating, of course, about the Second Amendment and all this other stuff pursuant to it. And it's almost as if the lives of those people weren't taken, right? Because they bypass that fact and go to discussing Second Amendment issues. When we see people I mean, don't even get me started on the whole George Floyd of it all and so many other instances that we can think about. And, I mentioned earlier about my perspective that I think that this has so much to do. And if I ever sit down someday, I'll write it out. But it's this reality TV thing. I don't think that people think that people are real anymore. They don't think the issues, to your point, are real anymore. They think that there's a plot, there's a season, and then we're going to turn around and see these people come back. They're not really dead. That's just TV. That's what happens on TV. Things get played out. It's fictionalized. And I really want to get your thoughts about that fact that people are desensitized to human issues, whether they're political, social, go down the list. What are your thoughts about that particular point of view?
We have a pixelated relationship with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm interacting with you through a computer.
Completely so.
And the only reason why I know that you're real is because we've encountered one another and acted
Exactly.
in the same room.
Right.
But that's not our experience of many people, if not most people in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly not if you've had social media. Most of the interaction that you have with people are people that you trust exist.
Mm.
It's impacted you can go and see the doctor now without ever seeing the doctor.
Right.
And when you interact with pixels differently than you interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
I should write that down, I think.
Yeah, put that someplace. Copyright that.
Yeah. But that's the case. I think even if pixels form a person, it's a different experience than the person and the pixel.
Right.
And you treat them differently. So you feel inclined to say things that you wouldn't ordinarily say to a real person, and certainly not even a person that you're touching or seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole different thing that happens here in this space than even exists on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different reaction.
Right.
Yeah. You would think that when you write something down, when you type something out, or even if you do a voice to text, that you've got that moment where you can stare back at what you say and decide whether you want to send or not. But that doesn't stop us from saying the most ridiculous things, even when we have that space to send. So it's not even immediacy. And there's a certain rawness, and you're talking about reality. But the fact is that, and I really do think that this is why historians go back and find, primary sources. I don't think it's because the only way that people could preserve their thoughts was through paper, or even that they thought that they expected that their letters to mama back home from the war front were going to be historical data points at some point. But there is a certain, and this is why every now and then I still do like to write a letter.
Right.
An actual handwritten letter and send it to someone. Because there's a certain connection that happens when your brain triggers what your hand does and starts to write that out. There's a direct connection between your hand, your mind and your hand. That is a different one than your mind and your mouth.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. There's an intimacy that exists between here and here than here and here. Even though you'd think that this is the one that has the filter and that this is the one that exists without a filter. But oddly enough, there's a lack of filtering that goes on when you come from here directly into here. There's a pouring out emotionally. And there's a truth that comes through that. And so people, even though it's a pixelated experience, we're saying so many of the things that we're saying are just in the harshest, rawest, most real fashion. And I think that's the experience that we're having, and that is now that's an entirely different experience, however, from reality TV. I mean, folks don't realize reality TV isn't exactly real.
No,
It's what you choose to record.
Right.
It's the storylines that you develop, and there's production involved in that. And it's non-scripted, but it is. And you've had a generation of people now grow up on reality TV.
Right.
It shouldn't surprise us that we had a president who came out of the reality TV world.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's another conversation.
Yeah,
but
totally.
You have a comfort level with somebody who's a reality TV star ruling the world, because this is the reality you grew up in.
Right.
We complain about all of that. So I don't know if that entirely gets to
It does.
to the purpose that you set out.
I think that, here's my next question in that regard, and it does get to where I was going. So as a person who tells stories that involve human beings, this is a profession, but it's also a personal thing to you, because as a person who is telling stories, you can care about it and still be objective. What has this realization of all that we've been talking about had on you in terms of impact as you approach what you're doing when you're doing what you do professionally? Has it had an impact? Does it make you pause and think, why am I even trying? What is that impact?
So what's interesting is now I've broadened out my professional scope. So that I'm doing things on both sides of the fence. For example, so there's a marketing PR component of what I do, and then there's also journalism. And it's interesting to live on both sides of those.
It sure is.
You and I, we worked together at same company for a while, doing public relations. That was my first venture into corporate PR. And I think the thing that surprised me as a former news guy was how much of what I thought was organically news wasn't. I think one of the fascinating things for me was to find out that the news conference that they were having on the merger and acquisition of X company, not only that it had been the works conversationally or even among the legal minds for months, perhaps, but that for weeks, the communications arms of those companies were working diligently on how to present that.
That's right.
I don't think many people conceptually understand that. By the time you hear that Sears is merging with JCPenney,
that's right. That's right.
Like that.
Whatever it is.
That's been going on for a while. Some folks have been, lawyers have been, accountants have been, and then the communications people for weeks have been.
Right.
And they know it, and they decide how you're going to hear it. Weeks before you hear it.
That's exactly right.
And what I didn't realize many years ago, how much of the communications model, and all this is baked into the cake, how much of the communications model is curated for us on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you appreciate that as a practitioner.
Well, yeah. I mean, the line, Jonathan, is what is our narrative? Right?
What is our narrative? Yeah, what do we want to say?
Exactly. And you give thought to that in advance, because it's not something that's happening in real time. It's something that will happen in time. And when that happens, we want to be clear on what our message points are, how we've developed it, what the potential impacts are going to be, and even having talking points so that if people disagree with it, what are we going to say to them?
What are we right?
Right.
So what I presume we can agree on then is that even before reporters get to report the news, the perception of reality has already been curated even before then.
Yeah.
So we're not necessarily even reporting reality. We're reporting the reality that we receive.
That's true. That's true. However, I would go to say that as the industry of communicating facts, figures, whatever the case is going to be, has shifted, and I'm sure you've dealt with this too on the marketing comm side as well. The advent of the reporter who walks in with an agenda that they want you to fill, a line within. I'm working on a story such that I've already concluded, for instance, that you are Satan incarnate. I just need you to say something on the record to say I talked to you. So all of it does go hand in hand. I fully agree. But I think that is the immersion of it, is that everybody is predisposed toward what that truth is and is looking for someone to support it in some way or the other.
Yes. And so here's what's really interesting to me, Charles, is that you would think that with the advent of, these
right,
phones here, and everyone's got
computers,
got a camera now, these computers that we're walking around,
mm-hmm.
that would give us more access to reality.
Right.
Because now everyone can tell. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that it's increased reality so much as it has increased awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're aware that things happen, but then with the video, you can interpret what you want from what you see.
Right?
The body cam does a great job of recording that something happened,
mm-hmm.
and that a sequence of events happened. But then you can go on to arrive at any number of conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And now one of the data points is whether you want to believe whether the video is in fact the video at all.
Exactly. Right.
Was it manipulated? Is it AI?
Right.
There's all of that. So it seems as if the further we go down, the further technology allows us to see things with our own eyes, to experience it firsthand. We can't even agree on what we're seeing.
Right.
And this is all coming together in a very odd mix that I don't know that we figured out yet. I remember, for me, one of the pivotal moments that I got to kind of be involved in. I was doing some live hits for Al Jazeera at the time. Mm-hmm. Was the Michael Brown killing.
Mm-hmm.
And how there were things that were seen, but because no body camera was available, we couldn't, there were still blanks that was there. Mm-hmm. Enough voids existed for people to fill in their own story at a time when that sort of technology was available to record that. So it's this balanced place where it's this imbalanced place where we're accustomed to seeing something, and now we don't have that. We don't have access to seeing that happen. And so back in this place where we still have to kind of fill in gaps that existed before, but then we're in this other place where we're dealing with, so we're dealing with the old way things once happened, and then we're dealing with the kind of a new way where people can still unfold things as they want afterwards. So the media at that time, and we're talking about maybe about 10 years ago, the media at that time, while it didn't exist, the mechanisms existed, but while we didn't see the actual killing at that time, everything else filled in afterwards.
That's right.
So you had enough of the social media to really push people in that direction. And now the media point of that, and this is where if you ask me, the law enforcement really messed up. They really hurt themselves. What do you think was, and it's not a trick question or anything, what do you think was the pivotal moment in terms of news coverage of the Michael Brown incident?
Oh boy!
If you had to guess, and you weren't expecting this, so I don't even know if my answer is right. But
the pivotal moment. Well, see, it's hard for me to answer, and I'll say why. Because interestingly enough, a part of my own story kind of overlapped with the Michael Brown thing, and it's interesting because for me that pivotal moment was when the officer was not charged because of what happened after that. But I'm interested now in what yours is.
For me, I think one of the pivotal moments was the arrest of the two reporters.
Interesting.
I don't know if you recall, there were
I do.
reporters who were arrested, who were detained. No, they were arrested actually. If I recall, one of them was from the Washington Post. The others might have been Reuters.
Yeah.
Definitely one was the Washington Post. So you arrest someone from the Washington Post, really? Well, if you know anything about the media doesn't like to be pushed around.
Right.
And there are two different kinds of relationship between, there's a local media relationship, and then there's the national news media relationship. And here's how all this ties together. If we started doing things full circle. You know, I told you about newsrooms becoming leaner in order to generate more profit and revenue, in order to generate more profit. So what does that mean? That means that changes the definition of what becomes news, or it alters. So what do I start to cover now? I start to cover the news that I can get my hands on quickly, which is crime.
Right.
And because of where our newsrooms are situated, they're situated in urban communities. You know, the station I was at downtown. A couple of stations did.
Right.
Another station was downtown. Another station was also in the city. So we can get to that quickly. It takes a much longer time to have to travel.
Right.
And at that time, transmit news. So when you remove that necessity to have to travel, and you get the news that you can get to quickly, which is the spot, that becomes the news that and you're already in the whatever bleeds leads
Right.
Mentality, and you can get to that quickly. So you don't necessarily need the staffing that you needed before to provide a more robust news product. What does that mean? That means that you become very heavily reliant on news sources that exist within those first responder communities, within the police department. So it's good if I have a relationship with Charles Poole or some cops and on in the organization, because now I can produce news that's easy to get to.
Right. This is, well, as you know, I spent several years with the city's police department, so Lord knows I can speak to that. But also, this is 2024, isn't it? So this would have been last year. Good grief. I was talking to a group and I told them that crime news coverage was a revenue stream.
It's a revenue, yes, it is.
So good to hear you put it in context without any prompting for me whatsoever, because I certainly do believe that. Because then people do this. Oh, that's a shame. Our communities are getting this. And they go about their way, but they do nothing to try to influence an outcome. And when they see it, going back to something we talked about earlier, that sense of being desensitized to it, they see it so often, it doesn't matter to them anymore. It's just what happens.
And it writes a parallel narrative that may not be true.
Exactly.
If all you're seeing is crime, especially at the local level, then you start to think that crime is up, for example.
That's right.
And we know that as a matter of, that statistically speaking, even right now, crime is down.
Exactly.
But if all you're seeing is crime because it's easy to get to, because it's revenue stream, it changes. So, so going back to this, it means that your access points accesses everything. And so you start to cozy up to your sources.
Exactly.
Police sources are very valuable in local news.
Yeah, they are.
They're everything. They're everything. And so you develop, even though it's kind of unspoken, but you develop the local news media develops kind of a cozy relationship between the local law enforcement. They exist along a continuum. And my thinking really, just to expand this just a little bit further out, is that Ferguson Police, St. Charles County Police, felt as if this was going to go the way of every other police-involved shooting, because they had an understanding that the local press wouldn't press them. that there was a narrative they could present. This guy comes out and he threatens one of our officers. Officer Fields in danger of his life, fires, and it goes away because the local press isn't willing to press us very hard because they need the access.
That's right.
So now you're seeing where revenue starts to impact truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that story more or less goes away. But it didn't this time because, of course,
exactly,
they made some consequential errors, leaving the body out for 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's a consequential error because it doesn't take that long for processing that scene in that way. And that was a pivotal moment. But the moment you decide that you want to arrest some local news, some national journalist, national news doesn't like to be pushed around that way, and instead of pushing out, pushing instead of pushing the lens away from you, I think all you do is get that light shining back on you even harder. So now everybody's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And what was a local story might just have remained a local story. Well, if you don't want to see me, I want to see what it is. If you don't want us to see it, I want to see what it is that you don't want us to see.
Exactly.
And I think that was a pivotal moment in terms of, and then once you get the spotlight on it, that changes, as you know, the event. It changes the scale of the event.
Totally did. I can agree with all of that very easily because I had thought about it too. You, of course, said it, but yeah, it makes perfect sense. And, we're pretty much at time here, but I have one question for you that I want to end with today. Given your experience, your professions, because you have multiple ones, but they're all still related in one way or the other to information. You're still a consumer of news.
Mm-hmm.
How do you consume information now? And are you able to consume it as an individual human being, or is your professional communicator hat always on?
Wow, that's a really good question. So, I have had to arrive lately at a place where I can find some modicum of peace. And that really has allowed me to again find the news that I want, find the truth that I want, and not be ashamed of that. Realizing that in my personal life I don't, and because of what I find are the set of circumstances that we have ahead of us, particularly from a political point of view, to find enough comfort in being around the people who are like me, but hoping that I have enough critical skills to be critical of the things they say that just don't meet the smell test. And so objectivity isn't necessarily always the goal for me now.
Wow.
But I can be critically unobjective.
I get that.
And hopefully arrive at enough truth. Now, if I'm reporting something, then I'm intentionally more objective. But I don't think I think one of the mistakes that we've lived in this era, this political era of the past almost decade or so, is a sense of both sidesism and developing equivalencies that they worked for us 25, 30 years ago, but you can't cover news in that way anymore because some things are more clearly definable as being irregular and not normal.
Right.
And it becomes malpractice of journalists and media not to point that out in the interest of balancing a story. They do more of a disservice to not to say that is strange. And that is false.
Right.
And to make that the issue, as opposed, sometimes some things don't require balance.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I saw something untoward happen to a child, we wouldn't want to, we don't, this issue of the recent school shooting in Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel a need to bounce that story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sympathetic towards whatever set of circumstances might have led that shooter to get where he got. People are dead.
Mm.
And the set of circumstances that led to people being dead matters to me much more
Right.
than the personal circumstance. And I think you can do that without discounting the other
Right. Right.
thing.
Right.
You don't have to discount his lived experience in order to say, but this is bad. This is what needs going back to now really, connecting the circle back, to the Apple user in me. Now we're really closing the rings. At some point, we really need to just come on back and get to the truth
Right.
of this thing, which is that what matters is that people have lost their lives. That in 4 instances, 4 people who went to school didn't come back home to sit there at and you mentioned that you were around you a portion of your life story is that you spent it around police officers.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting is that the people who you worked with, their families would kiss them on the forehead or on the cheek or whatever.
That's right.
And just they probably didn't really think so much about it, but somewhere planted in the back of your mind when you marry or get involved with a police officer is this acknowledgement that even if it's an nth of a chance that maybe they don't return.
That's right.
Because it makes sense that people who interact with the surly, negative, nasty, dirty side of life that maybe that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But now that's the relationship we have with our kids.
That's right.
You send them off to learn the ABCs and you tuck in their shirts and almost wonder, do you need to put on some sort of Kevlar vest?
Mm-hmm.
That when you send it, you have the same relationship with your kids now that those officers that you used to work with, that they had with their families.
Right.
And while in the one instance, on the one hand, it makes sense, this hand it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the story we need to tell. And there is no both sides there. There's one side.
Mm-hmm.
That's the story. That's the challenge that journalism faces now. Is at some point, everyone wants to do, 4 on your side. Well, be on our side.
Right. Right.
Be on our side. Advocate
Mm-hmm.
for things that really matter. So that's what gets up in my craw.
Well, if there were ever a moment to say you brought it home, you brought this home. You did that, Jonathan. And I want to thank you for that summary, because I think ultimately that is the thing. We do not, in pursuit or in ignoring the story, forget that these are people, that these are humans, and that there is value in that. And your insights, now having been on both sides now, are equally important, because it is a difference in how things are approached. But at our most centralized level, this need for information is going to arise out of not just a need to know, but a want to know and a want to be informed, so that you can make better choices for yourself, for your loved ones, for whomever that's going to involve, so that you can then know exactly what you should or should not do. It's not for entertainment. It's not to pass time. It's not to represent some specific interest of some particular group. It's so that you can individually make the best choices for not only yourself, but the other people that you're going to interact with in the world. So I want to thank you for, I knew, as I always do, because I invite really good people on these podcast episodes, and I knew that it was going to be great, but let me tell you, you gave me some stuff to think about that I have not thought about, which says a lot. So thank you for that.
Well, that's an honor because you think about things deeply. You know, we've known each other for quite some time.
It's been a long time.
And what's interesting is that, again, and these are some of the values of the new media that we have. Social media has brought us together in a way
Exactly.
that we might not have been before. So, I mean, there's lots of good that social media can do.
Right.
So it's always a pleasure being connected with you and on the platforms that we are.
Yeah.
To see you on a regular basis, to see what you're doing, to admire and / be jealous of your shoe collection.
Hey. Hey, you got the beard, I got the shoes. What can I tell you? You know, everybody's got their something, right?
You know, one day maybe we'll trade. But
Yeah, well.
I'm just I'm happy to know you. I'm happy to be fortunate enough to be around folks who are thinkers, and you are a thinker and a doer, and I just admire who you are as a person. So,
well, thank you, and I certainly reciprocate that. And I will tell you this much: you keep doing what you're doing because you are a truth warrior, and you do think through things, which is so rare these days. I can't tell you, my brain is like lit up. When I was in here earlier, I was telling Chris how tired I was because I've been traveling and doing all kinds of things. But my brain right now, all of the synapses are just like popping. So I'm re-energized. So there will be certainly, I believe, a lot of people who will feel the same way. So Jonathan Clarke, journalist extraordinaire, singer in his part-time, and father of a lovely young woman who is just his pride and joy. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good to be here.
All right.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Foolproof Wisdom Podcast. We always enjoy the company. Be sure to listen, like, subscribe, and share using Google and Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, Anchor, Overcast, YouTube, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this episode, we'd appreciate it very much if you simply tell a friend about the podcast too. Spread the word. Until next time, keep on living.